So before I talk at all, I want to show you a sneak peek. I want to show you a sneak peek preview of the finished product that we're going to build together. So hey, welcome back to the Bootcamp series. This is going to be maybe a long video, but I think it should be a fun video. So before I talk at all, I want to show you a sneak peek. I want to show you a sneak peek preview of the finished product that we're going to build together. So you open the app and it says choose a dog breed, and then when you select one, it shows you a slideshow. The images sort of animate or fade or transition in between each other, and then you're free to choose a different dog breed, and obviously you get a new slideshow. Now what makes this interesting is that none of these dog breeds and none of these images are actually spelled out or hard-coded in our HTML or JavaScript. Instead, we're fetching all of that data programmatically from another server out on the web, and this is all thanks to the JavaScript code that we're going to write. Now hopefully you did a little bit of homework and checked out the 10 days of JavaScript, because if you didn't, there's going to be parts of this video that maybe feel like we're moving too fast or we're not explaining every concept. If we stopped to explain every concept, this video would be 2 or 3 hours long, and I don't think that would be enjoyable for anyone. There are already a ton of different videos on the web explaining the very basics of JavaScript, and then there are also a ton of videos that show you super advanced things, but I don't think there are enough videos that are sort of the Goldilocks level of difficulty. What I mean is relatively basic, but complex enough that you're still actually building something that's exciting. Anyways, that's enough with this introduction. I'm excited to build this slideshow with you, so let's jump into the action. Okay, so in VS Code, I'm working with a new empty folder. Created just one brand new empty file, index.html. Inside it, I'll say doc and then hit tab. Inside the body area, let's just say hello world for a bit of placeholder text. And because our focus in this video is JavaScript, let's begin by attaching a JavaScript file down here right before the closing body tag. So we just say script, hit tab. On the opening script tag, we just say src or source equals quotes, and then we just point towards a file. You could name it anything, but I'll name it main, and then we want it to end with .js. So this will point towards that file. Let's go ahead and save this. Now we need to go actually create that file. So in my folder, new file, I'll name it exactly main.js. Okay, now just for a quick test to make sure that our JavaScript file is actually being loaded, we can say console.log, parentheses to call that, give it a string, so just quotes, and say hello from our JS. Let's give that a save, and now let's go view our HTML file in the browser. So if I refresh, cool, there we see hello world, and we can check out the JavaScript by right-clicking and choosing inspect. That will open up your dev tools, and then instead of elements, if we click on console, cool, there we see hello from our JavaScript. So now that we're up and running, right, we have a basic web page and we've attached a bit of JavaScript, what do we actually want to do first with our JavaScript code? Well, if we look at the finished product example, I think the first thing we should do is create this select or drop down element that you can click on, and then it shows you all of the different breeds of dogs. Now, what makes this interesting and sort of the entire point of this dog app is that I didn't hard code this list of breeds. What I mean is, if I view the source for this HTML, that select drop-down element with all of the breeds, it lives in this div that has an ID of breed. So that actual list of breeds doesn't live in our HTML, and I can click here to look at the finished product JavaScript. Nowhere in this code will you see a giant list of dog breeds either. So the question is, where is all of this data of these breeds coming from? Well, it's being pulled dynamically from another server out on the internet somewhere. So right now, let me talk a little bit about how I found this magical server with dog information. So there's this really popular page on GitHub called Public APIs. Don't worry, I know we don't know what an API is yet. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but this page lists all sorts of different APIs which give information about different things. So there's ones for animals, right? And you can see this list just goes on and on. Finance, health, music. But if you click on animals, there's this one called dogs, and I just clicked on that. Okay, and that takes me to this website, the Dog API. Now, before I show you how we can use this website and use its data in order to build our product for this video, I first want to talk a little bit about what an API is, because that's a phrase I've been throwing around, and in this bootcamp series, we've never heard of that yet. Well, if you jump over to Wikipedia, you can see that API is just an acronym that stands for Application Programming Interface. And you could read all about this if you want to, but in short, I would say that an API is just an organized way for one application to communicate with another totally separate and different application. So, for example, this application that has all sorts of information about dogs, well, they've created an application programming interface for their app, and now we can communicate or work with their data from within our application, right? We can programmatically request data from the dog app or from the dog API. Let me show you how this works. So from this dog API website, from their homepage, they have this URL here. And if you copy and paste this URL and open it in a new tab, you can see it gives me a bit of raw code, and it says message : and then here's a value. And this is just a URL for a dog image. You can see it ends in .jpg. And every time I refresh, it gives me a new random dog URL. This is because if we look at the address bar, this specific URL is designed to give you one random photo. Okay, but back on the actual dog API website, if I click on documentation in their sidebar, you can see it's going to give me different endpoints. An endpoint is just the URL. So here we see if we want a list with all of the dog breeds, this is the exact URL we can use. So if I copy and paste this URL into a new tab, aha, it gives me a bunch of raw data, but there you can see there's all of the different dog breeds. Okay, so we can use these values to populate our select drop-down element. And then, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but once we have the breed that we're interested in, here you can see from their dog app API documentation, there's a by breed endpoint. So if I click on that, if you want to get all of the images for a specific dog breed, this is an example of the URL you can use, right? So it's their address /API/breed, and then this is the part that you would hollow out and make dynamic. So instead of hard coding it to hound, you can just put in any dog breed here, right? And then /images, and if you view this in a new tab, that's going to give you all of the URLs for all of the images for the hound breed. So I think you can sort of see that with a bit of programming, we can use the dog API data to build out our dog slideshow. So at this point, the first question becomes, how in the world can we programmatically consume that data? Or how can we use our JavaScript to go out onto the internet, right? And this is the first one that we would want. Want to fetch, right? It's just the URL that lists all dog breeds. How can we fetch or retrieve this data with our JavaScript? Well, let me show you. So first, we would want to copy the address or URL into our clipboard. Okay, and then remember, we just have this empty web page with hello world. So back in VS Code, within our main.js file, we can get rid of this console log hello from our JavaScript. So we have a clean slate, and let's say fetch dog app API documentation. There's a by breed endpoint. So if I click on that, if you want to get all of the images for a specific dog breed, this is an example of the URL you can use, right? So it's their address /API/breed, and then this is the part that you would hollow out and make dynamic. So instead of hard coding it to hound, you can just put in any dog breed here, right? And then /images, and if you view this in a new tab, that's going to give you all of the URLs for all of the images for the hound breed. So I think you can sort of see that with a bit of programming, we can use the dog API data to build out our dog slideshow. So at this point, the first question becomes, how in the world can we programmatically consume that data? Or how can we use our JavaScript to go out onto the internet, right? And this is the first one that we would want to fetch, right? It's just the URL that lists all dog breeds. How can we fetch or retrieve this data with our JavaScript? Well, let me show you. So first, we would want to copy the address or URL into our clipboard. Okay, and then remember, we just have this empty web page with hello world. So back in VS Code, within our main.js file, we can get rid of this console log hello from our JavaScript. So we have a clean slate, and let's say fetch parentheses to call it. This is a function that the web browser offers to us. So we didn't have to create this function, we're just calling it. The idea is, inside these parentheses, we give it an argument, so quotes, we give it a string of text or URL, so I'm just going to paste in my clipboard. So we're just saying we want to fetch whatever data lives at this URL. So this code looks simple enough, but there's actually a bit of complexity going on, because fetch is not just going to return the data that lives at this URL. Instead, the fetch function is going to return a promise. So the question becomes, what in the world is a promise? Well, before we even get into promises, let me show you something really quick. So down here, if we say 2 plus 2, and then on a new line, 10 plus 10, 100 divided by 10. Now, most of the time in JavaScript, when it sees a line of code, it's going to finish and complete that operation before it moves on to the next one. Right? So any computer made in the last 50 years is only going to take like less than a millisecond to calculate 2 plus 2. But it's going to finish that before it moves on to 10 plus 10. And it's going to finish that before it moves on to this line, so on and so forth. Now, this behavior of completing one action before moving on to the next action, this makes sense when each action is only going to take a millisecond or less. However, when it comes to fetching data out on the web, well, that could take a long time. We don't know how slow or fast someone's network connection is. We don't know how long it's going to take for this server to actually respond. And so this could take a while. And we don't want to block the execution of all of our other code on the page while this finishes. So back to the question of, well, if fetch returns a promise, what in the world is a promise? Well, it's a way of letting this operation run in the background, and we don't care how long it takes. It could take a second or 5 seconds, but it's not going to block any of our other code from running. So JavaScript could begin this task, and then it's going to let all of these other tasks finish, and then maybe 5 seconds in the future, when this actually completes, then we can do something with it. Now, there are several different ways to work with a promise, but let me show you what we can do. So let me get rid of this example code. So we just have our fetch line. And actually, for the next minute or two, I don't want you to type this out with me and follow along, because first, First, I'm going to show you the way that promises have always or traditionally worked, but we'll see that the syntax is a bit messy and hard to read or make sense of. So then after that, I'll show you the more modern way, and that's when I'll want you to follow along with me. But I don't want to just jump right into the modern way, because I do want you to see how promises work in their simplest or traditional form first. Okay, so again, you don't need to type this out for the next minute or two, but fetch is going to return a promise. So at the end of this line, we're working with a promise. So we can say dot then to call a method. So a promise has a method named then. And in these parentheses, we can give it a function as an argument, and it will wait to actually call or execute this function until this has completed. We as the programmer have no idea how long this will take. It could be 20 milliseconds or it could be 10 seconds. Okay, we just know that then we'll call it at the
then, Maximus? Why are we here?
For the glory of the Empire, sire.
Ah, yes. Do you see that map, Maximus? That is the world which I created. For 25 years, I have conquered, spilt blood, expanded the Empire. Since I became Caesar, I've known 4 years without war. 4 years of peace and plenty and forgotten. I brought the sword. Nothing more.
Caesar,
Your lucky piece. Please don't call me that. Come. Please. Come sit. Let us talk together now. Very simply, as men.